This evening being the exiting of the Vassa, the rains retreat, we've got special treat. We'll be starting with, we'll be doing these Dhamma talks. It's Wat Pah Pong, a hallowed Wat Pah Pong tradition, and we're the different members of the community giving a short Dhamma talk, a short reflection, and also this evening we haven't heard much from Ajahn Sek apart from morning reflections, so we're going to invite him to be the first short Dhamma talk.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammaṃ Sanghaṃ Namassāmi. กราบขอโอกาสหลวงพ่อผู้เป็นประธาน Good evening everyone. I will feeling a little bit nervous for reflection this evening. For tonight, I think I'm feeling nervous because evening after Pavāraṇā day, Ajahn Nick invite me for reflection. I think, maybe not. Long Paul, please, you should give very, very appreciate Long Paul. But I thought, what should I do? What should I do? When I went to a non-stay room, I saw Mac. Hey Mac, how are you? Good. Could you help me, please? Sure. You can write or start for me something. The Mac help me for know something for tonight. Make it good for me. Good evening, everyone. Today is smoky and hot a little bit, something that I really appreciate Luang Paul Pesalo Dhamma reflection this morning, or beginning our day, something like that. I think about it all the times. When I go somewhere, when I am here, I am going to a hermitage. Beginning our days, sometimes I miss heard Luang Paul for a while. Luang Paul thought beginning our day, but I thought Luang Paul was saying beginning all day, beginning all day, beginning all day. There's a Mac right for me, but hey Mac, I think maybe long. I bad memory. I can. How I make a long story or short, something like that. There's a Mac right for me. There's a Mac thought, you should you remember you told me Luang Pu Sao, the Dhamma talk. Oh yeah, I remember that. Lupu Sao talk about when the people invite Lupu Sao for Dhamma talk. Maybe Thai version, English I can't. Ajahn could you translate for me? หลวงปู่เสาโยมนิมนต์ไปเมื่องานกฐินหรืองานพระป่านี่แหละแล้วก็มีคนไปรอหลวงปู่เสาเยอะใครๆก็อยากจะฟังธรรมะหลวงปู่เสาทุกคนก็ตั้งหน้าตั้งตารอเพราะว่าหลวงปู่เสาเป็นครูบาอาจารย์ที่เคารพนับถือของญาติโยมเป็นหลวงปู่เสาไปถึงญาติโยมก็นิมนต์หลวงปู่เสาขึ้นธรรมะหลวงปู่เสาก็ขึ้นไปธรรมะแล้วก็ไม่ได้พูดอะไรมากท่านบอกพุทโธพุทโธนะพากันทำพากันปฏิบัตินะหลังจากนั้นหลวงปู่เสาก็ลงจากธรรมะไปทุกคนก็เซอร์ไพรส์นิดหน่อยว่าต้องรอหลวงปู่เสาตั้งนานแต่หลวงปู่เสาพูดนิดหน่อยแล้วก็จากไปก็เหมือนธรรมะหลวงพ่อประสานโนผมได้ยินมาตลอด beginning all day beginning all day แต่ผมได้ยินเป็น beginning all day beginning all day มันก็ beginning all the time แล้วปฏิบัติตลอดเวลาผมได้ยินมาตลอดผมจะไปอยู่ที่ไหนนั่งสมาธิผมก็มันก็ขึ้นมาในใจyou can practice all the time or beginning or start like เหมือนกับ right here right now we can ปฏิบัติแบบ present moment something like that right here right now ผมก็เลยนึกถึงก็เลยเพื่อนๆด้วยครับผมก็คิดว่าก็การปฏิบัติบางครั้งถ้าเราคิดอนาคตมากเกินไปหรือว่าคิดในเรื่องอดีตเกินไปมันก็จะทำให้เราฟุ้งซ่านได้ผมก็เลยคิดว่าbeginning all day หรือว่า right here right now นี่ผมก็เลยนึกถึงธรรมะของหลวงพ่อจะเป็น beginning all day หรือ all day ก็ไม่เป็นไรก็ให้เราปฏิบัติเวลามีอะไรมากระทบก็ผมก็ไม่มีอะไรก็จะขอบคุณแล้วก็อีกเวอร์ชันหนึ่งท่านจิตตปโลท่านช่วยเขียนให้แล้วก็ผมก็ thank you ก็ขอบคุณหลวงพ่อเป็นอย่างมากขอบคุณหลวงพ่อเป็นอย่างสูงแล้วก็ thank you for everyone for helping me learn English for everything I am very very happy to be here may you be well and enjoy the practice we can learn together we can practice together we can walk together and we fight tooth and nail together and that's a talk with Tissaro and Mac hey Tissaro if I for kilesa for kilesa maybe tooth maybe we can for kilesa we can fight teeth and nail something like that because kilesa very very difficult talk with Cittapālo or Max or Pesalo thank you everyone for listening me thank you
I'll translate the brief part about Luang Pu Sao. Ajahn Sek giving a lovely talk in English, and quite unexpected. Was prepared with a notebook and didn't need to use it. But just the brief snippet that was in Thai was a story of Luang Pu Sao is Ajahn Mun's teacher, and talking about how Luang Por Pasano's morning reflections kind of made Ajahn Sek think of Luang Pu Sao, and that was one time where there was lay people who had invited Luang Por Sao to give a Dhamma talk, and they had waited quite a long time. They were quite looking forward to it, and he had agreed to go. And then when he went, when Luang Por Sao finally went, and they were really happy, and he got up on the Dhamma seat, but then he's known for he doesn't say very much. So he was just okay, well, just do Buddho, keep Buddho in mind, and practice well, keep practicing. And then he got off the seat and left, and so the lay people, it's there's this sense they had waited a really long time, and they were really had planned for this for a while, and looked forward to this talk, and then that's all he said. But then, in a sense, that's all we need. So it's feeling that sense of gratitude for Luang Por Pasano's kind of beginning our day, morning reflections. And at first he would hear beginning our day, and it was he didn't hear beginning our day, he heard beginning all day. So this reflection of beginning all day, what does that mean, beginning all day? So it's I might be proliferating about the past, but if I'm got that sense of beginning all the time, or beginning in every moment, then it's this kind of reflection of practicing all the time. And so it's kind of similar to Luang Pu Sao's teaching, just taking that one little bit and using it for the practice. Then he went back into English, so I think that's that's about it.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammam Sangham Namasami. So what's coming to mind is just thinking a little bit about been doing these kind of reading sessions with Ajahn Sek during tea times. We've been meeting sometimes at the Mub, and teaching in English a bit by reading some children books. And then he's teaching me a bit about kindness and joy and gentleness. So it's a nice exchange. Not really a fair trade. I feel like I'm getting a lot more by what he's teaching me. But anyway, so we're reading these. Currently, I think he's reading a Winnie the Pooh book called Positively Pooh. But we were going over a different kid's book. It's a Cat in the Hat book
called "There's No Place Like Space." And I mean, it's quite an interesting book, talking about the different planets and our solar system and kind of fun facts. I think they're facts. I haven't done any fact checking, but so it's like describing the different planets and how, I think maybe it's Neptune, so light can kind of float on the ocean if it were to be on the ocean. And, or like, I think it was Jupiter, so big that all the other planets can fit inside of it. And then it talked about Earth, and it was saying how the Earth's, constantly spinning 24/7, but us humans, we can't feel it because we're spinning with it. And I thought it was really, really interesting, kind of reveling in that. And Ajahn Sek to me more, and just thought that there was good Dhamma in that. Thinking about experience and how, when I'm spinning with the thoughts, proliferations, and the world of the mind. Can't see it really, can't understand it. But then, I was thinking about, the Dhamma practice and mindfulness, meditation, being able to, trying to learn how to stop spinning with the moods and thoughts, and so you can get a chance to actually feel them and see them. I remember I was 21 and in Maui with some friends. And we were at a beach, hanging out, enjoying ourselves. And this particular group of friends they were into this like kind of game of going into the ocean and getting close to waves, and then as the waves would come near them, just before they would kind of crash onto them, they'd duck. They'd be wearing goggles, they'd duck underneath, they'd go under the wave, and then they'd look up and watch the wave kind of crash over them. And so I was with this group of friends, and they invited me to do that, and I think I was pretty scared. I didn't want to do it, but I was interested enough, and peer pressure kicked in, and so I went along, and I'm quite happy I did, because it was a really interesting experience. The wave's coming. You're like, what the hell am I doing? I'm going to get swept up by this wave. And right before it hits, ducking underneath and looking up, and it was quite beautiful to see the white water and the bubbles, and And it's like I couldn't even really feel the power of the wave itself, because I was quite below it. I mean, you get a sense that, oh, this is a powerful thing coming over me, but it felt pretty safe, actually. So yeah, that was kind of a similar analogy. It's kind of in meditation, how dropping below experience and being able to watch it from a safe place where it's not so threatening. Like you feel like you're not going to get like pummeled. So being here at Abhayagiri, that's a big part of what I value. Is the meditation practice in particular, and the valuing stillness and what can come out of that. Being able to view my experience inside and outside of the world in these different ways. And as dropping more and more below the surface, feeling, I think it's a similar feeling of going underneath a wave. I mean, the wave's still there, and it can be intimidating, but again, it's coming from a place of strength or safety or trust. That you're in a good place. You're safe. But living at Abhayagiri, that's definitely not all of the experience here. It's a pretty balanced, dynamic training and practice. There's a lot of emphasis on working, cultivating generosity, service, aspects of virtue. We just finished 3 months of studying the Vinaya, different rules from the Patimokkha. So I think I can be quite, on one hand, it's a really like I was saying, balanced kind of training, and I think it produces some pretty well-rounded individuals. Thinking about the monastic community here, I think it does a good job, but definitely challenged myself with kind of going outside my comfort zone with learning these various other aspects of Dhamma practice other than the things that I like, the things that I want to keep pursuing. So like in the Vinaya classes, it was noticing how my mind definitely would go into the details and the kind of particulars and get kind of caught up in that. But on our last class, I think it was Cittapālo who suggested having Lungpor come and offer a kind of Q&A session for us. And kind of one of the things I took from that was Lungpor kind of presenting a bigger picture, in terms of the Vinaya, he relayed this story. I've heard it before, and I'm paraphrasing, but of Ajahn Chah speaking to Lumpur Sumedho and telling him how the Vinaya is all about holding on, the Dhamma is all about letting go, and his task is to find the middle, the balance between the two. That's kind of the heart of the practice. So this was very helpful. To help see the forest from the trees. So and it's there's a lot to learn here. It's very rich experience. Many different aspects going on, things that people can be cultivating, and it's not easy. It's tough to be learning so much in such a diverse way. One of the lay guests here was telling me how at this particular monastery, he appreciated this particular monastery because it hurt in all the right places. Admittedly, I'm not 100% sure what he meant by that, but I assume that it's like a good workout, like going for a good run, or some kind of bodily exercise, how the next day, you can be quite sore, but you feel good about it because those are the signs that you're getting stronger. Okay, I'll leave it there.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammāṃ Sanghaṃ namasāmi. And there's not too much to say for me, so I'd just like to speak my appreciation for the community that's supporting us and supporting the monastery, including the resident community, who's doing a lot to keep the monastery going, and the lay guests who have been staying here and keeping the monastery going. And then just the surrounding community and near and far, effort, time, resources to keep this place going as it is. So I'd like to just express my appreciation for everyone and their effort and their sincerity. So I think I'll leave it there.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammāṃ Sanghaṃ namasāmi. So I thought I might talk about perception of cessation this evening. This was a practice that I used during the winter retreat, my Sāmaṇera year. And great, it was very beneficial. But But I think one of the best advices I ever received some 20-some years ago when I started practicing was that meditation is it's an experiment. You need to figure it out on your own. And I think a big part of the brilliance of the Buddha's teaching is that he provides a general framework, but he doesn't give you a lot of specificity in some regards. That's obviously, leads to some debate and holding of views, but I think it leaves it open, and I find it to be incredibly engaging to kind of come up with interpretations or understanding in my own way. And the impetus of this was at the time I was reading a lot of Katkunde and he just mentioned this attending to cessation. And I was like, well, how does one do that? And we find in the suttas, and I'm not such a great remember of specificity, that one attends to arising, one attends to ceasing, one attends to arising and ceasing. And I think it's important to note that at least my perspective from it was, and subsequently after having done it and reflected on it, that the arising portion might be something that you work on for many, many, many years. At that point I've been working on it for 17, 16 years. I'm not such a good time recaller, but so we need to have a stability in the mind, because practice of cessation is actually quite, in some ways, difficult because it's around perception of things that can be, highly varied. So, having, put that perspective in, maybe now or in the future, if your mind is of that, it's a new thing. It was very exciting because it was something that, practice will get stale, and sometimes we need to come up with something to invigorate, something that's different, in order to keep the mind engaged. Because fundamentally, that's why the mind is wandering all the time for much of our practice, because the mind is is seeking something. So if we find things and new ways or innovative things to do in our practice, it satisfies that desire of the mind at the same time while training the mind. So fundamentally, I think it's good to have a full, keep an anchor in awareness of the body. One needs to be, have a separation from the hindrances to really kind of work with this. But one then just opens up to the sense field in their entirety, with probably a limit, like not really get into what the mind might do, because it can really end up, breaking your ability to stay with the continuity of this practice. But one just allows whatever the predominant, some impingement in the fields, noting when that ends. So, and this is a practice that one can do throughout the day. I think I'm actually quite blessed to have chronic pains in many ways, because I'm not able to actually sit that much, and I have to come up with ways to keep working. But while one's walking to one's kuti, as a tree passes, it ceased. This ceased. Your feet, it's gone, it ceased. A bug, a night in the headlamp, it flies through your field of view, it ceased. A bird calls, caw, caw. At each end of one, ceasing and ceasing. Eating the meal, it's amazing how fast the taste sensation of food is gone. There's so much desire and thinking and wanting these things, but it's actually an amazingly fleeting sensory experience. Bodily sensations, very flickering. So you have to use this kind of verbal cue, and it's not like you want to capture all the ceasing. It's that one inclines one mind to a certain perception, and then at a certain point it's somewhat of a path and fruit of any of these perception trainings, like the 32 parts or the 4 elements. You place your mind, working, there's an effort that's applied, and then the perception basically at some point manifests, and there really isn't any real need to do any labeling. One just inclines to seeing things in this ceasing way. Now, the importance of this is the fruits of this. I mean, I'm sure it can vary. But, like in the greater questions and answers, there is the statement that wisdom is to be developed and consciousness is to be understood. And I remember asking this question about consciousness. What is consciousness? And this seeing the cessation of phenomenological conscious experience is quite enlightening, in that we normally, like in the questions, the question of Tissaro, because of craving, the seamstress of craving, we pass over the cessation of contact. We're going from one object of desire to another object of desire to another object of desire, and we're not seeing the cessation of the other object, and we then hold in our minds that it still exists. So, for example, if I look back at Long Pa, I see him, and then I turn away. In my mind, I'm still holding that he's back there. But that conscious experience, when one has practiced cessation, you realize that's gone. It's never going to come back. All of these impingements are one of a kind. They'll never happen again. And there's two major things that kind of helps with this. Is, first of all, because there's a lack of objectification, the knowing quality of mind, you can see a separation between the phenomenon and the knowing. Actually, the idea of even talking about this came from someone asking me about this, this idea of the citta and the knowing. And, it's hard to see, especially when you're engaged in hindrances, or you're engaged in objects. It's really something it's useful to have. I mean, I found that this practice really brought about the Vimocciyang Cittang, the liberation of the citta from the khandhas. Because, it fits that in the Anapanasati Sutta, it fits in that realm. It fits like samadhi is the third step of the citta and the Anapanasati, and the third stage in the Dhammas of the Anapanasati Sutta is the contemplation of cessation, and the fourth stage of the citta is this separation of the citta from our liberation or freedom. And I don't mean that in any kind of enlightenment way. It's just, it's clear that they're two separate things. But, this idea that objects are just, they're ephemeral, and one is, one sees the cessation. It takes you away from the objectification. And so, back to the example with Long Pa, where I can look at him and see him, and then I look away, and then it's now in my mind the arising of a mental idea that he is there, as opposed to actually a visual thing he is there. And the fruit of that is, as well, is that we carry this idea that things exist, and we take for granted that they're going to continue to exist. We think that our loved ones are going to continue. We think that our job is going to continue. We think that we're going to stay in one place, or the weather's going to stay this way, and all that stuff eventually with a practice like this really kind of just becomes absurd. Because if everything underneath it, every little individual perception is ephemeral, what's the point of any of those stories? So, plug for coming up and trying to, if there's other ways, this strikes you, and try different methods in any of your practices. Don't think that necessarily somebody's just going to tell you what to do, and half the fun is actually figuring it out. I really think on your own, something. And it doesn't mean that's the only way. It's a way that works for you. So an encouragement to experiment and have an open mind. I didn't really have any idea what the fruits of this practice would be, but quite useful. I still work with it. And that's about all I have to say.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Don't really have a theme in mind, but been appreciating the talks that have come so far, and one thing that Koṇdañño said that made me think of actually something, his encouragement to really just try it out, the meditation and the practice for ourselves, and experiment. It made me think of kind of when I first started 3-4 years ago here. So maybe even before I was in Anagārika, staying at the duplex and kind of really just getting into the meditation and like the sitting and walking, really for the first time in a deeper way. Probably was hadn't spent much time at the monastery, but I had done a few retreats. And I remember when I was trying to learn the walking meditation, getting some kind of idea of what I'm supposed to do from reading the books and maybe asking questions at the Q&As and listening to Dhamma talks, but then actually doing it. It literally felt like I was just walking back and forth, and I even tell myself that too. I'm just walking back and forth. I'm not meditating at all. And I don't think I'm getting anything from this. So there was not much encouragement to continue. But I knew if I don't at least walk back and forth, just like go through the motions, then I'll never actually understand what the walking meditation is about. So I continued to walk back and forth for quite a while. And then kind of have the courage to experiment with different things, thinking about different things, choosing certain kind of themes, or just thinking on Dhamma, seeing that there's different parts of the body that I could put my attention on. Then kind of slowly over time getting a sense of kind of how the whole walking meditation thing works. But still experimenting very much today. Quite often I still do just walking back and forth. But sometimes it just that's what it takes to, in order to kind of calm down the mind and settle things. I definitely recommend walking meditation to people. I'm someone who can't sit all day, so it's really helpful to kind of break it up. So I guess this is a talk on walking meditation. But don't feel like I really have much more to say. I did appreciate Khantiko's kind of opening, or just his expressing his appreciation to the community as a whole, and even like the short-term guests. It is a kind of a rare opportunity for us, kind of as just individuals, to have kind of everyone's attention in order to be in this kind of space where we can express appreciation to them and to everyone. So yeah, everything that you all do is very much appreciated, and it's because of you and largely everyone here as a whole. That's why we can have this amazing community and amazing space to practice and do things like walking meditation.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammāṃ Sanghaṃ namasāmi. Good evening, everybody. I thought I'd just say a few words about a sutta that I've been looking at recently that's been helpful to me. It's the second sutta in the Digha Nikaya, which is the long discourses of the Buddha. It's called the Sāmaṇera Sutta, which is translated as the fruits of the renunciant life. And essentially what it is a detailed description of this path that we're on, the spiritual path to the ending of suffering. And it in a sense follows the threefold training we talk a lot about. That's the practice of sila, samadhi, and panya. So ethics, meditative tranquility, and wisdom. And it's especially helpful because it shows the detailed aspects of these things and how they are related to each other and how one builds on the other. So the first point that caught my attention when I looked at this sutta and I found very helpful was the conclusion to this section on sila, or on morality. And this is after the Buddha talks about the practitioner and how they've developed the precepts and how they purified their livelihood. So not engaging in things that are unethical or harmful to make their living. And in a sense, it's talking about the fruits of an ethical life, what the purpose of, say, keeping the precepts and all this is. And it says something like, for the practitioner who has thus developed this aspect of morality, they feel within themselves the bliss of blamelessness. That's one translation. And in a sense, what I see this as being is the happiness and well-being that comes when our conscience is clear, when we don't have remorse. And this is a very important thing that we can aspire to and look forward to as we keep the precepts and as we abstain from doing actions that we regret. And he gives an analogy of what this happiness is like, and it says that it's like a king who's defeated his enemies, and that he doesn't fear danger from anyone or any neighboring people. And it's this feeling of safety. So it's saying that the bad karma that we've done is in a sense our most dangerous enemy, and
We can't get away from it. It weighs down our conscience, and so the freedom that comes when we're, say, pure and ethical sense is something very, very important. And the sutta goes on to show how this foundation in ethics is the basis for the development of meditation. And this is something that the Buddha repeatedly details, how the development of the mind, the higher states of tranquility and of insight, of awakening, they all come from the foundation of having a purified ethical foundation of our lives. And so after the section on ethics, it talks about how samadhi arises for the practitioner. So samadhi, we talk about meditation, all these things are brought about when we turn our attention inwards and, say, put energy into seclusion. So turning our attention away from the things of the world, from the temptations and pleasures that the world can offer us, and looking into our minds. And the first, or say the most important point that it shows is that the real gateway into what the suttas call samma samadhi, or right meditation, right tranquility of mind. The gateway to get there is through abandoning the 5 hindrances. So this is always something important to keep in mind, that with the foundation of sila, the next thing we have to look for is the hindrances arising, ceasing in the mind. And it gives a very helpful analogy of what these hindrances are like. So the hindrances, the 5 of them, are the hindrance of sensual desire, of ill will, of drowsiness, of anxiety, and of doubt. And the analogy is that sensual desire is like being in debt. Ill will is like being sick, the grave sickness. I think I'm getting these right. Drowsiness is being in prison. Anxiety is being enslaved. And doubt is like journeying through a dangerous wilderness area. And so obviously these analogies are things that are quite serious and quite dangerous. And the most important thing that strikes me is just that perceiving these hindrances as such, and as such obstacles and impediments to our safety and well-being is the first thing, because all of them have a appealing aspect to them. That sensual desire, there's an aspect of something beautiful, something attractive, or ill will. There's something that's repellent or ugly, or we deem worthy of our hate or disapproval, but somehow we're attached and we're inclined to keep thinking about it, keep mulling it over. And the like for all the rest of these. So the sutta goes on to say that as the practitioner develops in their practice, that the overcoming of these hindrances is a cause for great joy. And in the same way that a person who's gotten out of debt, or who's recovered from a serious illness, or been released from prison or enslavement, the very real and palpable and deep feeling of joy and happiness that would arise from that. In the same way, when we overcome these hindrances and irritants of the mind, that all these positive states of spiritual happiness will arise, and it details them, and this is a list of dhammas or qualities that you see in other places in the suttas as well. So it says that as the practitioner sees that these hindrances are abandoned within themselves, joy arises. This is pamoja. And as joy arises, then piti, or rapture, arises. Then with the arising of rapture, the body becomes tranquil. This is pasadi. As the body is tranquil, the mind becomes happy, sukha. And then in a happy mind, the happy mind is easily concentrated, samadhi. And so in a sense, it's the abandoning of these hindrances that's the primary condition for attaining what the suttas call samma samadhi, the eighth factor of the Eightfold Path, which is in the suttas always defined as the jhanas, the four jhanas. So I'd just like to share all this with you tonight to encourage people to look into the suttas. They can be quite complex and seemingly all these different disparate ideas, but they present this very detailed and helpful map of the terrain on the path to awakening, and seeing these various aspects and stages of the path can help us to remember to focus on the right things and not fall into certain pitfalls, and keep our attention on the great results that the Buddha is holding out for us and is showing can result from our proper practice. So I just shared that with you for tonight.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammam Sangham Namasami. Hard act to follow, some good Dhamma from the Venerable Sampanno and Sāmaṇera Sutta. But I have a bunch of wheat for you. So I apologize if you're gluten-free. There's a discourse, the suttas, where one of the disciples of the Buddha, a monk, is out and about, and he meets up with a lay person, and they have a conversation, and he ends up sharing some very inspiring Dhamma reflection. The lay person is very touched, very impressed, and yes, the monk, did you hear that from the Buddha's own words? Did you hear that in the presence of the Blessed One? And the monk replies along the lines of, whether I heard it from the Blessed One himself or not, it came from the Blessed One. And he says, just as if there was a man carrying a bushel of wheat, and he were to come across someone else, and that person were to ask him, "Friend, where did you get that wheat from? Where did you get that bushel of wheat?" And he would say, "Oh, in that village down that way, there's a massive pile of wheat, a huge mound of wheat, and you can take some wheat from there. That's where it came from. So in the same way, all the the teachings, they come from the Buddha. I've been reflecting a lot on gratitude, and in Pali, Koṇdañño kataweti, sort of a sense of appreciation, gratitude, and inspiration to acknowledge that and repay it. And recently listening to a talk from Lumpur Sumedho, where he was at the City of 10,000 Buddhas, reflecting on Master Hua, recounting Master Hua, the sort of founding father of the City of 10,000 Buddhas, and just recognizing how he made the generous offer of Abhayagiri, the initial property, and reflecting on how, if Master Hua hadn't had that desire and that generous inspiration to give this gift, none of us would be here. And then you can reflect if Lumpur Sano and Lumpur Amaro, if they hadn't accepted the duty of establishing the monastery and giving, much of their lives to this, we wouldn't be here, we wouldn't have this opportunity. But then you can kind of think, well, if it wasn't for Lumpur Cha, if Lumpur Cha hadn't established Wapapong and the various monasteries that Lumpur Sumedho and Lumpur Pasano ended up coming across, of course we wouldn't be here right now. This monastery wouldn't be here. You can think, oh well, if Lumpur Cha's teachers wouldn't have practiced and established their monasteries for Lumpur Cha to come across, and so on, and so forth. And if you follow the dotted line, eventually, where do you think it ends up? It ends up back at the Buddha. So, just another acknowledgement of the source of the Dhamma, very practical way. And another, kind of in the same domain, the teaching we've all heard many times. Spiritual friendship is the whole of the holy life. There's the event when, Ananda makes the inspired utterance to the Buddha. Isn't it amazing? Isn't it marvelous? Spiritual friendship is half of the holy life. And the Buddha says, no, Ananda, that's incorrect. Spiritual friendship is the whole of the holy life. But what often doesn't get recounted is what the Buddha says next. And how is spiritual friendship the whole of the holy life? It's because if the Tathagata, if the Buddha hadn't realized awakening and been a good spiritual friend and shared the Dhamma, we wouldn't have anything in terms of the Dhamma. So again, this sort of fundamental source of pointing back to the Buddha. And why is it that it's said that a stream enterer, they have unshakable confidence in the Buddha. They have no more doubt regarding the Buddha, and the Dhamma, and the Sangha. I think partly it has to do with just the nature of these sorts of reflections. Recognizing where the Sangha comes from, recognizing what we've received from the Sangha, recognizing where the Dhamma comes from, recognizing what we've received from the Dhamma. And, conviction, saddha, is in Buddhism, it often gets translated as faith, conviction. But it's quite different than the way we usually think about the word faith, because it's actually it's a faculty, it's a power, it's a skill. Saddha is it's not really a static thing. It's a skill we have to attend to, we have to recognize, we have to return to, reinvigorate. And these sort of reflections can help with that. And again, when traditionally when saddha is defined, it's defined as conviction in the Buddha and his awakening and the qualities that he embodied and taught. So just some little reflections about that. And I hope you enjoy this wheat.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammam Sanghaṃ Namasami. I've been in Anagārika for about a little over 2 months now, and so I have one foot in the kitchen and one foot kind of in the monk's world. And I have to echo what Don Khantiko said earlier about appreciating the amount of help and generosity that has been extended by the lay community. Just today, I was the head cook today, and a woman came by and offered a little dessert and some rice and a little entree. And I didn't really get a chance at the moment to reflect on how wonderful that was, because I was pretty busy. But I think that's one of the wonderful things about Abhayagiri is I get the opportunity later on to reflect on how wonderful those things are. And I don't think I ever really allowed myself to do that out in the lay life. Just working with all of the lay guests, the short-term and long-term lay guests, has been pretty wonderful. Just seeing everybody help out and willing to contribute to the goodness of this place, helping each other. And so I don't have quite too much to say tonight. I just wanted to extend my appreciation for all the generosity that I see. And also to the bhikkhus and the Sāmaṇeras and my fellow Anagārika for supporting me, listening to some of my difficulties, offering encouragement, and providing me with this container to reflect on this.
on this goodness. So I'll offer that tonight. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammam Sangham Namasami. So, one theme that's been on my mind this last year has been the theme of truthfulness. And so I thought I'd talk about that. The reason it stands out to me is there's this list of 10 qualities called the paramis, and it's basically a list of, it's translated as perfections. You can think of it as being like character traits that we develop in order to advance our progress on the path. And they cover a lot of themes you might expect: generosity, virtue, wisdom, etc. There are a few that kind of stand out as being a bit unique, and one of them is this quality of truthfulness, or satchaparami. And one reason I find it interesting is because one of the other items in that list is virtue. And so one would think that truthfulness would be subsumed into that category of sila, or virtue, because that usually includes the precept of abstaining from lying. So I just find myself coming to this question of what is it that makes truthfulness stand out from common sila, or virtue? And I find that it goes pretty deep. On one level, you could say that truthfulness is just kind of the positive counterpart of the precept against lying. With the precept against lying, it's framed as a negative. I will refrain from telling lies, but you're not really required to say the truth. You're just required to not lie. And so truthfulness can be taken as being, okay, well, I'm going to, maybe reveal true things that I wouldn't normally reveal. Take that quality of truthfulness to a new level. And it can mean that, but I think it goes a lot deeper than that. The Buddha gave, I think, very special attention to this quality of truthfulness with a principle of Dhamma that he called the preservation of truth, or safeguarding truth. And basically what he says is, when you have faith in something, you say that you have faith in it. When you have received something by an oral tradition, you say that you've received it by an oral tradition. If you've logically deduced it, you say you've logically deduced it. If it's your preference that a view is true, then you say that it's your preference. But based on these various qualities, you don't jump to the conclusion and say, this is definitely the truth. But you're very honest with yourself about what you actually know. And I feel like this quality, that teaching really points to this quality of truthfulness as being more bound up in intention and a quality of character. On one level, there is truth in terms of our words, but then there's also truth in our intent and truth in our action. And actually, if you really tease it out all the way, you can see that this theme of truth is a thread that runs through the entire Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path being right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. And this word right is important because it's not any of these qualities by themselves, but they need to be held in the right way. And the Pali word that's translated for is sama. And I'm not a Pali scholar myself, but one rendering that I've heard of that term, potential rendering, is true. So you can think of the Noble Eightfold Path as being, being true in your view, being true in your intention, being true in your speech, being true in your action, being true in your livelihood, being true in your effort, being true in your mindfulness, and being true in your concentration. And developing this quality of truthfulness so that we're really committed wholeheartedly to the path, it's really what purifies the heart. And you can see when you contemplate this quality of truthfulness in daily life, that it really is related to defilement or lack thereof. For example, when we have passion arise, it usually springs from justifications about why the thing we like is good. And the antidote that the Buddha gives to that is to contemplate the unattractive side of whatever the object of passion is. In other words, you're gaining a more well-rounded perspective of truth. So passion arises from a lack of truth. Similarly with aversion, when there's something, say, if there's a person we have ill will towards, then it's very easy to justify why we may hate that person or dislike that person or whatever level of aversion we have. But it's very easy to also block out the positive aspects of that person. So again, there's a lack of truth that allows that aversion to arise. And the antidote being to that particular defilement, things like the Brahmaviharas, loving kindness, compassion, appreciation, basically qualities that allow us to give added dimensions and contextualize individuals so that they don't fit into this one-dimensional, characterized perception of a being who is so justifiably hateable or whatever. And then, of course, the delusion that passion and aversion spring from ultimately stems from a lack of knowledge of the Four Noble Truths. So this quality of truthfulness really goes pretty deep. And it's not a mere principle that operates on the level of words. A very useful practice I found is, and it can be done during meditation, really at any time of the day, but as thoughts come up, you can just ask yourself over and over again, is that true? Is that true? Is that true? Because we have a tendency to believe what our minds tell us without really questioning those assumptions. And that's when you begin to realize that truth is not so much a matter of building on, say axioms or first principles like, a philosopher might come at truth, but truth is really more about questioning what we think we know, challenging our assumptions about the world. I find this is really a powerful tool for basically simplifying experience. And it seems all the more relevant today with issues like say, the coronavirus, where it seems to be a trend that people are questioning the truth of the media. And that can be very confusing because we don't know what we can believe and what we can't, what media sources are reliable and which aren't. But according to the Buddha, there are only 6 media sources that are worth attending to. And those are eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. And when you can view your experience in terms of these basic components of reality, it really simplifies things a lot. You see how there's not really... Basically, these 6 senses are the truest thing that you can know about your experience. It's just that they're being experienced, and then seeing kind of their functions as they arise and cease. And when you can frame your experience in those terms, you see the narratives that get added to it, and you begin to see just how far those narratives fall short of the truth. And ultimately what we want to do is we want to get to a place where we can make truth into a refuge and not a source of fear. Because a lot of people live their lives in fear of truth, and it's a very sad thing. But the truth is not something that you want to have as an enemy because it's immutable. You want to have it as an ally. So if you get into the habit of siding with truth, then you've got a very potent ally on your side, to say the least. So I think that's probably all that needs to be said. So I'll just leave this encouragement for people to contemplate this quality of truthfulness and really put it in the highest regard and make it into an ultimate refuge.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammaṃ Sanghaṃ Namassāmi. Good evening, everybody. My name is Candasīlo, and I've been training as a monastic here at Abhayagiri for a little over 2 years now. I've just rejoined the community after 2 weeks of relative solitude, which means that my ability to articulate my thoughts might be even more limited than usual. So if what I'm about to say is completely jarbled and incoherent, you've been warned. But I'll try to say a thing or two. Because I only get the microphone once a year, I do want to first and foremost express my sincerest gratitude for every single person really who supports this community in one way or another. I regularly reflect just what a blessing it is for me to have the opportunity to be a part of this community and
live at this place. Because I really cannot imagine having better conditions for doing the work that we're trying to do here. So, yeah, I just want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart. I can't thank you enough. It definitely, these last couple of years have not been easy for me, and I've lost track of the times I've wanted to leave. And I actually did run away once. But Ajahn Dhamma found me. And he brought me back. And yeah, I really can't express how happy I am to still be here. I thought tonight I might share a little story that happened recently about basically a time I learned 2 important Dhamma lessons from an unexpected teacher. And so this took place about a week ago. I was out for a walk up on the road that runs along the ridge of the monastery. And I was up there by myself, and I was overtaken by two joggers, one of whom was a man, possibly one of the brothers from Mount Tabor, but I'm not sure. And the other jogger was a big dog, actually. And they jogged right by me. But actually, I'm not really sure why, but the dog decided to abandon the man and hang out with me instead. And there was a point where the trail forked, and the man, he went left, and I went right, and the dog went with me. In the end, it actually figured out how to find its way back, so no trouble there. But anyway, so I had this, suddenly I had a companion on my walk, and couldn't help but notice some of the behaviors of this creature and admire them. And so one thing I noticed was that as we were walking along, this dog and I, there were a lot of leaves on the road, and when one side of the road was covered with leaves, the dog would always move to the other side of the road. And then when that clear side became covered with leaves, then the dog would move back to the other side. And I thought, this dog's pretty smart. 'Cause he or she just knew, or didn't want to slip, basically, because the leaves are quite slippery. Wanted to have a surer footing. Another thing I observed was that as we would go uphill, the dog would walk, and when we would go downhill, the dog would trot or run, because gravity was working with it and not against it. And once again, I couldn't help but think how smart this dog was. And I guess the similarity that I saw in these two behaviors was contrary to my own tendency to try to make my own life difficult. This dog was actually trying to make its own life easy. I thought, that's revolutionary. I have a tendency to fall into this, what the Buddha called Atta Kilamatanu Yoga, which is the yoke or the path of self-deprivation, or the idea that depriving oneself of the comforts and conveniences of life will lead one to true happiness. And yeah, the Buddha said this is pabbajitena na sevitabba, so it's not to be pursued by one who has gone forth. And we chant that regularly, but for some reason it still hasn't really sunk in. So I keep trying it and making myself miserable. So that's the first lesson actually that I learned from this dog, was that because the dog didn't seem unhappy, seemed he was making its life easy, and it wasn't suffering, so I'm thankful that it taught me that. And then the other thing that I learned sunk in, or I figured out a little later as we kept walking, and we got sort of to the end of the trail, and then we started to head back, and I noticed that it was a hot morning, and we'd been going uphill quite a bit, and so the dog naturally was panting quite hard, and there was no water source available to us, and so I couldn't help but I started to feel quite sorry for it. But then again, I noticed still this dog showed no signs of really being unhappy or suffering in any way. It was kind of like it's like chasing the quail through the bushes and exploring off the beaten path, and by all signs it was having a lot of fun. And so it was experiencing what I perceived to be physical hardship, and yet not suffering over that. And so I drew a connection to myself, because one of the main challenges that I have faced here at Abhayagiri is really despairing when I'm afflicted with any sort of hardship, whether it's physical, emotional, mental. I really get carried away, and I think my reflection after my experience with this dog was that when we experience hardship, or we fall on hard times or whatever, we suffer for two main reasons. One is we have a false perception that it's permanent, that it's not going to go away or change, and also we form an opinion about it. We say, this is bad, I don't like this, and therefore I'm unhappy. And so that reminded me of Marcus Aurelius, actually the Roman emperor. He taught that we should always have two principles ready at hand. One is that the universe is transformation, or that's the translation. The universe is transformation, and the other is that life is opinion. And we find these teachings also in the Buddhist dispensation. So the universe is transformation. That's the principle of impermanence. And life is opinion. I see that in the teaching on the worldly winds, because the Buddha said when we're faced with things like praise and blame, gain and loss, fame and disrepute, pain and pleasure, we tend to react either with elation or depression or dejection. But a skillful response to these things is actually to recognize that, one, they are impermanent, and two, that they're bound up with suffering, partially because they're impermanent. And so the skillful response is to not, keeping that in mind, to not form that opinion, to not let ourselves be elated or dejected by them, just to recognize them as conditions, as states that are not inherently good or evil in and of themselves. And so, returning back to this dog, it's panting, it's hot, maybe it's dehydrated, but it's not suffering. And I don't know if it consciously recognized this, but it's not suffering because, these things are impermanent and they're not inherently evil. And so, going forward, I'm going to try to keep that reflection more in my own mind, is that when I'm assailed by whatever condition I might not want to be present in my experience, it is going to change. And even if it doesn't, it's not inherently evil. So those were the two important lessons that I learned from the dog, and that's my teaching for this evening.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammāṃ Sanghaṃ namasāmi. I love Pavāraṇā Day. There's something about hearing all my fellow community members speak. And it's just, we've got such different personalities and perspectives, but it's really quite a pleasure to listen to what everybody has to say. And I was sitting over there thinking, like, this is a great night out. And isn't it awesome that that's how I feel about this now, like in my life, that, sitting in this hall, hearing my friends in the holy life share words on Dhamma, and I'm loving it. It's just such a good time, and it's nice to reflect on. I feel like I'm living a much more wholesome life than when I was a lay person. It was also, I just had a big grin on my face when Ajahn Sek began his talk and he was speaking in English. That was really quite a delight. I've been amazed at his progress in English, and then I have the good fortune of being his upatak, and so he's been on retreat, and I go and after the meal I clean up his bowl and everything, and we'll usually talk, and he'll ask questions about words in English, and then we'll continue talking, for 30 or 40 minutes, and then Max comes in with his notepad and book, and he goes in and sits down with him, and then they study English for I don't know how long, an hour or more. And then tonight I find out he goes up to the MUB, and Josh is reading Dr. Seuss books or something, children's books to him. So clearly he's studying a lot. And I noticed tonight he used, I printed out a list of idioms for him. And tonight he used, to make a long story short, I noticed, and fight tooth and nail. Which,
he was practicing them the other day after the meal, and Max came in, and Ajahn Sek said, "Max, you have to fight the kilesa teeth and nail." And we kind of smiled at each other. I said, Ajahn, it's tooth and nail. And he said, no, tooth is one. To fight the kilesa, you need all the teeth. We got a kick out of that. When I say I have the good fortune to be Ajahn Sek's upatak, I really mean that. It's funny. I when I was in Anagārika, I drove down to the airport and picked him up. So I was one of the first to greet him when he came here to California, and I've gone on quite a number of adventures with him. Of course, just our time in the monastery here, but he went with me back home to Alabama. I grew up in South Alabama, and Ajahn Sek was very gracious to accept my family's invitation to join me, and we flew back to Alabama, and we went alms round every day, and that was an incredibly touching experience because people were generous beyond belief. We'd have multiple people just stop us trying to figure out what we were, because I doubt monks had ever been to this small town in Alabama. And so they just be curious, like, well, I notice you're wearing different clothes, and what's that about? Probably with a little more of a southern draw. And just kind of explain, and that we were on alms round, and then they would say, well, hey, can I take you to lunch? Like this, there's a great restaurant over here. And, then I explained to them, well, on alms round we walk, and people offer food into the bowl, and then they say, oh, come on. Well, this one particular guy just said, okay, come on, let's go to the grocery store, and just takes us to the grocery store and brings out bags of groceries and just stuffs our bowls full. And that happened multiple times on the trip, and we were there, I think, 7 days, and I wrote little notes about each of the people that spoke to us and offered, and I counted it up afterwards, and in that 7 days we had a total of 28 people approach us and make offerings. And part of that I say, wow, that southern hospitality is real. But I also say Ajahn Sek's barmi is real too, very strong. And we also went on Tudong, Ajahn Sek, myself, and Ajahn Yaniko. And I can't remember, how many weeks were we out and about? Was it 3? 3 weeks. 3 weeks wandering on Tudong. And I'm not going to get into that, but mainly just speaking on, I've been in a lot of different circumstances with Ajahn Sek, from all the various work tasks that we do here at the monastery to traveling across the country to South Alabama as probably the first monks that have ever been to this small town, and being with my family, which we're a boisterous bunch, you could say. We like to laugh and goof around, and they're not familiar with Buddhist traditions at all. But he fit right in and got along great with everybody. To Tudong, to wandering around California, and to being his attendant now and looking after him, and there's this stability that has been there in all of those circumstances. And for me, I came here because I really, it was like, I don't need more information about the Dhamma. I want to see the living embodiment of the Dhamma. I want to be with beings who embody the Dhamma. And, I've, of course, was drawn here to just be in the presence of Lumpur Pasano and to have that exact same feeling, and then having these different adventures with Ajahn Sek and just seeing the results of the practice in regards to not just that stability, but the way his compassion arises in these different circumstances, and he knows so well how to interact with somebody in a way that seems to support them so perfectly. And I've witnessed it with other people, and I've experienced it myself, and those have been the most profound teachings for me. Those teachings of body and speech, of presence, of embodiment of the Dhamma. I didn't really have a theme, but an expression of gratitude for our teachers here, and the way they teach the Dhamma through embodying it, and it's had such a strong impact on me in regards to inspiring my faith in the training and the results of the practice. So, I guess this will just be a talk on gratitude for our teachers. I'll leave it at that.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammang Sanghaṃ Namasami. I think I have less brain cells functioning at this point than I did earlier, so I'll see if I can say something coherent. I also just got off retreat. And I am exceedingly grateful to have had that time last few weeks. One of the things I did during my retreat, I recorded one Ajahn Sek talk from the book The Way It Is most days. In one of the talks, Ajahn Sek tells a story about Ajahn Chah asked him to give a talk, and he prepared the talk, and he gave this talk, and everybody said it was a great talk. And Ajahn Chah just looked at him and was like, don't ever do that again. Because he planned it, he prepared it, and Ajahn Chah said, it doesn't matter whether your talk's good or not. It matters whether you speak extemporaneously or not from the present. And it's such an interesting teaching that I don't think I've completely wrapped my head around what this teaching actually means. But I love it. It's saying, I think, to trust the present, to trust the void, the mind, the silence, and to operate out of that as opposed to a plan, preconceived notion, memory, self, what you think people want, what you think you should be, what you think you should say. Sort of operating instead out of the great mind. And then the possibilities that presents for how one can live one's life from that same place. The small planning mind controlling mind. It's interesting too, because in Zen Buddhism, at least as sort of translated through sort of the beats and what's that guy's name? Not Suzuki Roshi, D.T. Suzuki. This emphasis on spontaneity, which is not really something that I ever emphasized in the teachings here in Theravada Buddhism at all. But somehow that relates to this teaching from Ajahn Chah. I'm not exactly sure how, but for me there's always a difference when I feel like someone's speaking from improvising, not knowing what they're going to say. There's a vitality that I connect to, that I appreciate. And there's something to it. There's something very rich there. To say nothing, obviously, of just simply being in the present moment. Ajahn Paññavāro, in one of his talks, says that when one is in the present, one is as close to Nibbana as one can be. And after all, that's the goal. And for myself, this is my 9th Vassa. And ever since I had 5 Vassa, people would ask me, what are your plans? What are you going to do? Where are you going to go? And it's still the same answer, that I don't know. Because the only place I'm trying to get to is the present. So if all the time I'm thinking about where I'm going to go, it's a hell of a trap, And it's remarkably hard to be in the present, to stay in the present, to operate from the present. And life can feel so large and overwhelming and insurmountable when we're thinking about the future and the past. And another Ajahn Chah teaching about, kani, it's just this much. It's not that much, really. The present. The little bit that's happening right here, right now. This little bit of sound, this little bit of picture, smell, taste, whatever thoughts and feelings, it's not that much. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. We can learn how to relate to it skillfully. And gradually decrease the suffering. Yeah, so again, deep gratitude, that theme that keeps popping up tonight. For everybody, for Longpor, Ajahn Yanako, Ajahn Sek, all the bhikkhus, Sāmaṇeras, novices, which is also a Sāmaṇera, so double props, I guess. Anagārikas, the lay community in the monastery, and the lay community globally. Yeah, may we all get completely free of suffering.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammam Sangham Namassāmi. As I was doing that introduction, I was just thinking how nice it is to have the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha as a refuge, because then I don't have to give the talk. It's not me at all. I'm just repeating what the Buddha said. And
there's something nice about that. I don't have to take responsibility for it. One of the stories that's been kind of rolling around in my head this evening as been listening to various talks, and came up when I heard Ajahn Sek's talk. It was a few months ago. I came up to the mob, and Ajahn Sek and I think Sāmaṇera Candasīlo were making brooms, and so I was just and they said they had a baby squirrel. I was like, oh wow, you have a baby squirrel? I think maybe don't handle it too much, just send it back out into the woods. So I think Sāmaṇera Candasīlo might have done that. We kind of took a little baby squirrel out 100 or 200 feet away. And I was just sitting with Ajahn Sek and enjoying his presence. And it was a day where I had a particular amount of dukkha, experiencing a bit of emotional pain. And so I asked Ajahn Sek, what do you do when you have a lot of pain, when you have a lot of dukkha? I can't remember what I said. And I can't remember the order of what happened when, but because I was sitting with him just for quite some time, but around that time the baby squirrel came back. It found his way onto Ajahn Sek's robe, which is where it had lodged itself the first time as well. But it kind of jumped all the way through the woods and found its way back to Ajahn Sek. And so when I asked Ajahn, what do you do when you have a lot of dukkha? Or what do you do about the times when you have a lot of dukkha? He told me, well, and I don't remember the words exactly, but he said something like, well, dukkha is normal. It's, I have dukkha, you have dukkha, the baby squirrel has dukkha. It's just normal. And, I mean, for most people in the room have been around Ajahn Sek at least a little bit, so you can imagine that the kindness with which he said all of that, and it made an impression on me, because it's like, of course the baby squirrel jumped through the woods to get back to Ajahn Sek's lap. Like, of course. Where else in the world would you rather be? So one of it's been an ongoing kind of takeaway for, I think every year it just gets a little bit stronger, of the importance of like a true heartfelt happiness, or not happiness, kindness in the practice. I mean, happiness is good too. But and because that's what allows us to see the dukkha and not get just completely lost and overwhelmed by it. When we have that sense of kindness, and especially the kindness to ourselves, then it kind of allows our heart to start to open and kind of reveal all of the true nature of our experience, which often involves a lot of physical and emotional pain. But if we don't have that kind of basis of kindness and patience with ourselves, then our heart's just not going to open. And if on the other side we're like kind of harsh or impatient with ourselves, it leads to a lot of inner turmoil. And it's hard to get anywhere really with a lot of inner turmoil going on. And so yeah, it's just something that I think every year gets a bit stronger. That importance of just like letting the process take the time it needs, not rushing it, not trying to make it into something that it's not, but kind of consistently like approaching, everything, but in particular our own experience with that sense of kindness, because there's so many aspects of the deeper layers of our mind and our consciousness that are really quite vulnerable and, depending on our life and circumstances, but for many of us quite like immature. And the metaphor that always comes to mind for myself is to just kind of like the idea of a really patient and loving and wise parent to his child, and kind of approaching my own heart in that way. Because a lot of times my heart really feels like just a child, in all its good and bad associations. And it takes, for children or people that have been around children a bit, it takes a while to develop enough of a trusting relationship with a child for it to be willing to trust you. It differs child to child, but and to open up to you. And that basis, that track record of just the child seeing you consistently, caring for it. Not to say, you're indulgent with it or you're kind of giving it everything it wants, but that it knows that you're looking out for it. That I've found is just a really fundamental basis for being able to understand and experience the full range of what's going on in our consciousness, and allowing that process of kind of purification or kind of understanding experience, the movement towards a relaxed and complete experience of ourselves happens. And it can take a while. But it's that there's what comes to mind is just that there's no bit of that kindness that's wasted. Even if it's the smallest thing, the smallest intention, even if you don't completely, you're kind of the harsh tendencies of the mind or the frantic tendencies of the mind are still very present. And if you can just find just a moment of kindness, just a moment of patience, then it kind of has its own momentum, and it'll be that much easier to be kind and patient as you keep doing that. And so even in the midst of like quite a lot of suffering, like I never feel like that a kind intention is wasted, regardless of whether anybody sees it or, I feel like it made a big difference on my mind or my train of thought. Like there's some part of me that knows like, oh yeah, I'm moving in the right direction. I think that's the main thing that I was contemplating on. Just, sometimes you feel like the baby squirrel in dukkha. Sometimes you feel like Ajahn Sek, generating metta and kindness. Sometimes you feel somewhere in the middle, but it's always a fruitful process. And putting a plug in for that's I haven't regretted any moment of kindness I've ever had in my life. So leave that for people's reflection.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammam Sangham Namasami. So I take care of Ajahn Cittapālo, and one of the things that we do when we take care of senior monks is we put out their robes before puja. So I would go to his locker and open it up, and the first few times I was actually surprised how disciplined I was. I was like, I'm not gonna check out all this stuff. Then slowly I just found myself like, oh, what's this? What's going on here? I really hope one day, Ajahn, that you make a book of all the notes that you've written, because Ajahn writes all these incredibly helpful teachings and puts them on the door of his locker. And one that kept on coming up tonight was just pause. What's important right now? I think for myself, for a long time, I was really trying to force myself into a mold. You hear a teaching and you're like, well, I have to do it this way, and now it was actually quite an exhausting process being here first, because the attitude with which I would pick up these things, I would hear teachings, or I'd hear people express different points of Dhamma, and it felt like such an exhausting process, because it's seeing it more of making the Dhamma a checklist, something I have to, oh, now I have to do that, oh no, now I have to do this. And it really felt so forced and unnatural, but you have a certain amount of faith and you keep on doing it, and then at some point you just kind of like, I think I come back to that note, this pauses, and what's actually important and what's actually working, and am I actually getting benefit out of what I'm doing? And one thing that really has felt like such a crucial turning point in my own practice is making the practice meaningful. In a way that's actually meaningful for me. And it actually works. And I think it's really great hearing all these reflections because there's something in the heart that tells me, yes, that actually that's Dhamma too. And I would have never thought to say anything that anyone really said tonight. And there's this quality in the heart that recognizes, yeah, that's actually Dhamma too. And there's another quality that recognizes that, oh yeah, that actually means something very much to that person. And there's something that you can tell, yeah, they've actually gotten a lot out of that. And so it's a little bit of walking and just dwelling in uncertainty, because it feels like we have to take the teachings and then make them into something that's going to liberate whatever we're working with. And that really does take patience and a willingness to really go beyond just trying to, okay, I'm going to sit here now and I'm going to tell you, mind, you're going to follow that breath. And 20 seconds pass by and you're like, oh, wait, okay. What was I supposed to be doing? And I think of all these things all these times and moments where I just keep on giving myself commands like, okay, now you're going to do that. Now you're going to do that. Now you're going to do that. And it's interesting that we can get into this conception that, yes, we're doing the practice, we're doing these teachings, but miss our attitude and approach. Again, coming back to the idea of something, making it memorable, making it meaningful. I really appreciated Sāmaṇera Candasīlo's reflection because I too, without telling myself so much on the surface a lot of the time that, pain is gain and you can torture yourself all the way to nibbana. I was quite skilled and adept, and I'm incredibly grateful for the time I've had here that, that's actually my attitude a lot of the time. And really applying that kind of lens, like taking a step back, pausing, what's important, and I think having that tool and being able to look at our impulses and our ways of conceiving how practice should go or what I need to do next, and checking off all these boxes, and I started to ask myself the questions, do I actually feel better? This is actually my life. I'm not just doing this part-time. If I keep on going this way, I'll wake up at the end of my life and be like, I tortured myself for a while, and that was that was what I did. Oh yeah, I should probably. Well, let's put a break on that. think around that time, pretty recently too, just hearing the Buddha describe that, yeah, if we don't have that sense of joy and enjoyment in the practice, then sensual pleasures will have quite a pull. And it makes absolute sense that it's part of our job as practitioners to really develop a sense of ease and excitement and engagement towards this process, towards everything we do. So my wish for everyone here, everyone who ever listens to this, is that we find a sense of contentment, of ease, of joy, of really appreciating whatever effort we're making towards liberating ourselves, towards freeing the heart. I'll leave it there.
Sadhu, sadhu.